Hello, and welcome to Bear Necessities. This is Bear, and today we are going to be going over the rogues. So I'm actually on beta here. I went and bought just some literally mitigation armor, and just bought some stuff off of the jewelry vendor, bought some basic weapons, because it's all we need to kind of show you. I'm going to just kill these gray mobs here in Fear Out Beach. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into rogues. So we're going to start with similarities between the two rogues, and then we'll talk a little bit about Swashbuckler. Then we'll talk a little bit about Brigand. So rogues, one of the things that they both get is smuggle, which smuggles also or is actually a really interesting skill. It's just group stealth. So similar to the Fury and the Illusionist, which get group invis, both rogues get group smuggle or group stealth. The next thing that both of your rogues get is they get this DPS steroid. Lasts for 1 minute. It's really nice. So they get DPS mod of 48 for 1 minute, and it's on a 5-minute recast. So only 4 minutes of downtime, which is pretty sweet. Both rogues also get stances, so you get your offensive and defensive stances. If you look at the defensive stance first, it decreases your combat skills, increases your aggression and your defense and parry. It also gives you extra mitigation, so 18% effectiveness of worn armor versus physical damage, which essentially just means if this is 152, this actually in defensive stance is going to be 152 plus an extra 18% on top of that, which is like I don't know, 170 around is what you'll get in terms of mitigation from this one piece of armor. So that's the defensive stance. The offensive stance on Swashbuckler and Brigand, or the rogues, is really good. It's called Daring Advance, and on a melee hit, so that's auto attack abilities, plus any sort of combat arts, has a chance 6 times per minute, which is quite a lot, to interrupt and also deal melee damage on the target. Also decreases your defense and increases your combat skill. So this is your offensive stance. So kind of just generally going back to the always be casting, super important on swashes and rogues, because you want to get as many of those procs as you can. Alright, what else? So we also get Shadow Slip, which is, Shadow Slip is just an easy way for you to get into stealth. It also decreases your threat priority by 1 position. So if you get aggro, you can use that and you'll drop lower than the next person. So hopefully the tank, and they'll be able to, keep it at that point. And you are in stealth afterwards, so you're able to use a stealth ability. So that's pretty nice. As you can see, these weapons don't hit too hard. The last thing I wanted to mention about just rogues generally is they get a taunt, which is kind of interesting. I guess they were like, oh, well, rogues can be a backup tank if they need to be, but they do get a taunt, and the cool thing about the taunt is it does interrupt, but it also dispels arcane beneficial effects. So if something has like a damage shield on it that is arcane in nature, you can actually remove damage shields and stuff like that. But that's pretty much it for rogues. Again, the only general comment I have is making sure you're always using abilities You want to get as many of those procs as you can. All right, let's go ahead and since we're already on Swashbuckler here, let's talk a little bit about Swashbuckler. So when it comes to talking about these DPS classes, I'm gonna kind of move away a little bit from the normal group buffs, single target buffs, mainstay skills, things like that, and talk a little bit, because rogues and predators don't really get a whole lot of group buffs. They get a lot of offensive buffs for themselves, and they get a lot of debuffs and things like that. So we're going to kind of talk in terms of steroids, debuffs, and then talk a little bit about some of their damage skills. We'll categorize them a little bit, and then we'll talk about some of their mainstay skills, or things that are very unique about that class. So let's start with the steroid buffs. So we already talked a little bit about Ruthless Cunning that both rogues get. But one of the really good steroid buffs for Swashbuckler specifically is Spurious Bravado. So this is something that's just a buff that's always on you. And on a melee hit, you get Bravado 5 times per minute. Gives you 60 haste, which is insane. And also increases your hate gain by 5%. We'll talk a little bit about why that's not really that big of an issue. Some people would be like, oh, well, there's downside, 5% hate gain. But that's not really that big of a deal as a Swashbuckler. But that 60% haste is insane. The issue with this is if you do get hit, if you take any damage, then the proc ends. So you want to not be on the aggro list so you're not getting hit, so that you can keep that buff up. 60 haste. It's pretty awesome. So then you also get Perfect Finesse, which increases your haste as well, but it also increases your multi-attack. 38 multi-attack, especially in Classic, is pretty insane. I mean, if you look at all my jewelry, I think I get 1.5 multi-attack or something like that. So having a steroid buff that gives you 40, or right at 40, is pretty awesome, especially this early on. And that lasts for 36 seconds, so pretty decent amount of time. And then finally you get Inspired Daring, which every melee attack for 25 seconds, you will do additional melee damage. So the interesting thing about that as well is if you use AoEs, if you use your blue AoEs, then it will also hit everything with that. So it's pretty much just a 100% proc for 25 seconds that you can use whenever. All right, so that's it with the steroids. Let's talk a little bit about debuffs. So one of the big things about rogues in general is they get a lot of debuffs. So first off, Flurry of Blades. If you hit all attacks, then you reduce physical damage or physical mit by 504, which is pretty nice. Snappers does not have one. Let me see. This one, reduces int. This one reduces DPS. This one also reduces physical mit. So in general, and I'm not going to show every single thing, but you have six debuffs that reduce stats. So you reduce some physical mit. You also reduce. It's a combination of defensive buffs. So like reduces mit, reduces defense, stuff like that, and a mix of offensive debuffs. So like int, DPS mod, things like that, which reduces the amount of damage that the mob actually does to you. When it comes to just their damage, a CA breakdown, just to kind of talk about like positionals versus just normal abilities, stealth abilities, etc. Swashbucklers get around 6, and I say around because there's also some combat arts that are like less than ideal, like strike of consistency, stuff like that. So I don't think I counted some of those when I did these tallies, but you have 6 normal combat arts. You have 3 positionals. So you have lunge or kidney stab flanking and behind, viscerate flanking and behind, razor edge, which is front or flanking. You have 1 stealth ability, Shanghai. So you don't have to weave in stealth a ton, but you do for that 1 ability. And then Swashes actually get 2 AoEs, which is 1 more than the rogue counterpart Brigand. So let's talk about some mainstay skills. We've already talked about Spurious Bravado, but I want to pull it up because my next one I kind of goes hand in hand with it. So you get a hate transfer, so 60% of your threat that you gain is actually transferred in combat. So cool thing about this is you get when you get increased hate gain through your bravado, it does actually increase the amount of threat that you're transferring to whoever you have this on. So of course you're going to put this on the tank in your group. Being able to transfer that threat will help him keep aggro, which is really nice. Another reason that the Spurious Bravado doesn't matter as much is you do get this passive buff that's always on you, called Avoid Blame. So 4 times per minute on a melee hit, you decrease your threat by a certain amount, and you also decrease combat mint. And it also says on a hostile ability you can get it. So this is on your melee hits, but also anytime you use an ability. All right. Some other mainstay skills. I mentioned Flurry of Blades. This is a nice skill. If all of them hit, you get a pretty. This 504 is not too bad for a physical mit debuff. So I would consider this one of their kind of mainstay skills, as well as Dashing Swath, which is a knockdown, does a lot of AoE damage, and they get it over their Brigand counterpart. Another skill that I guess I'll mention, is they actually do get a mez, which is really weird. It looks like a little taunt button, but it's actually a mez. So as you can see, this Hooptic Fetcher here is mezzed. But I kind of want to just show you how much damage those procs do. I mean, look at all that proc damage. Let's hit a couple with some AoEs. Knocks them all down. Now, if I just had some reuse, we'd be in good shape here. All right, kill this guy, and then talk a little bit more about Swash, and then we'll move on to Brigand. All right, so Swashbucklers are definitely debuff powerhouses on the same level as Brigands. In Classic, the gap between Swashbuckler and Brigand debuffs is actually a lot less. Once Brigands get some extra debuffs in the next few expansions, they really do take off in terms of having more debuffs than Swash. But the thing about Swashbucklers is they get kind of, more of those mix of offensive and defensive debuffs. They get more AoE skills, and as the expansions go on, so even in the next expansion in Desert of Flames, They get probably one of the best, well, not probably, yeah, up until, ROK, they get the best AoE attack passive ever. I think it's like 50% or 52% AoE attack, and it's just a passive buff that you always have on. It's called Hurricane. They get even more ranged AoE skills, extra offensive debuffs. So Swash is really a really good all-around class in that sense. I feel like if you want to play a melee class and do a lot of damage, but like it's not super skill intensive, Swashbuckler I feel like is up there. It's pretty easy. It's not like you're managing all these stealth skills. It's really just managing, hey, I got my steroid buffs, make sure I'm using those, make sure I'm capitalizing on the time when I'm in my steroid windows or my burst windows, and then just always be casting stuff, and you're going to do a lot of damage. You're going to do a lot of auto attack damage as well as expansions go along. So I think Swashbuckler is a great class, good all-around class. Great in tank groups as well because the hate transfer. Great in scout groups, off-tank groups. Just overall a great rogue. All right. So that's it for Swashbuckler. Next, we will talk about rogues. Or brigands, sorry. All right. Now we have the brigand. So let's kind of get started in the same aspect that we did with Swashbuckler. So we already looked at Ruthless Cunning, which brigands also get. But brigands get a 1 minute duration haste buff as well. So when paired together, they have haste and DPS. It also gives them a knockback, blur vision, stun, throws back, target back, blurs vision, stuns. For 2.5 seconds, triggers 4 times per minute. But in raid encounters, this is just a haste buff, essentially, which is really nice. But that's the only other steroid they get, so they don't get any sort of spurious bravado or any sort of like super proc buff or anything like the swashes get. Now when it comes to their debuffs, we will talk a little bit about their debuffs, a little bit more than the swash even. Let's pull up. So we got parry. This. Alright, so if we look at some of their debuffs here, they have debilitate, which is decreases mit by 1600. So super big mit debuff on physical damage. And then murderous rake also decreases combat mit by 5.8, which is a ton, and also decreases mit versus elemental, so essentially all the magic resist by 1536. So with just these two spells, like, there's a ton of mitigation decrease. Also their snare increases elemental, or decreases elemental by another 1184. They decrease parry with gouge. So altogether, and I'm not going to pull up every single one, but altogether they have 6 debuffs that reduce defensive stats only. So while the Swashbuckler had kind of a mix of offensive and defensive, brigands are really your big defensive debuffers. So they just reduce that mit and avoidance, and make it so everyone can deal a lot more damage to the mob. When it just comes to combat arts, brigands get 6 normal combat arts, so no positionals, and then they get 6 positionals, and as you can see, I have them all up here. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 backstabs, and then they have 1 front. And all the backstabs can be from behind or flanking. I don't know if they have any specific just behind spells anymore. They used to, but they may have changed them over time. I can't remember. Also, they have one stealth ability, just like Swashbucklers. So when it comes to, weaving in a lot of stealth stuff, you don't really have to worry about it as much on Brigand or Swash. And then they have one AoE ability, which is this Baroom negotiation, which doesn't even do like if you remember, the Swashbuckler one did like something like 1100 damage at max, and this one does like 500. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the damage. That's the damage breakdown for Brigands. Let's talk about some of the mainstay skills. So Debilitate, that we just showed, and Murderous Rake. These are two big abilities that you're going to want to always keep on cooldown. The duration of them, 1 minute and 12 seconds. You want to keep these on the mob. The debuffs is just ridiculous. Befuddle, it's worth a mention here. So Avoid Blame on the Swashbuckler side kind of does a similar thing. Befuddle does drop your threat a little bit more, I believe. But there does become a proc, I think, in maybe EOF, where Avoid Blame becomes really good because it also procs damage when it procs. Some other weird things that Brigands get, they get a group snare, and then of course they have their single target snare. They also they get the taunt as well. So their taunt actually reduces or removes more levels of benefits. So I think the Swashbuckler was 62 at level 50. This one's 103. So a little bit better taunt. But they get these two random weird kind of skills, which, like, for example, this one, it stuns you and you kind of like fall down, but then when you get attacked, well, he's got to hit me. Yeah, so whenever he hit me, it actually like did some counterattack damage, which is interesting. So yeah, that's like an interesting skill, but it's like a rescue a little bit because it increases your threat so that you get the you're essentially you won't be at the very top maybe, but you want to be at the top because it stuns you and then you need to get hit to trigger this. So it's probably not super widely used, maybe if you're like tanking something. And then you also get essentially an intervene type spell. So you can put this on someone in your group, and you essentially will take a certain amount of the damage. So you'll take like 42% of the damage for 3 attacks, and then whoever is being attacked will get their threat reduced. So yeah, it's just a weird ability, and it probably has very few uses, but I did want to mention it because it's something different that they get. Generally, let's talk a little bit about Brigands. When it comes to later expansions, even in DOF, at 52 they get, or I think it's 52, but in their 50s to 60s they get Amazing Reflexes, which is a AoE immunity proc, which is nice. Of course, you probably want to set up something to trigger to tell you when you're immune, so that you can utilize that in raids to stay in during AoEs and stuff. You also get a really nice ability called Dispatch, which reduces MIT versus everything by a ton. And then they become really the debuff powerhouses. I mean, they already are have a lot of debuffs even in Classic, but as expansions go on, they get more and more debuffs. They also get double down, which is pretty sweet, which kind of like you can kind of copy the damage of for a certain window of time. They do really good single target DPS, to be honest, over expansions, just because a lot of times they can just stay in, keep wailing away on it, and they're pretty necessary for raids. Like people want brigands because or at least one brigand, for all the debuffs that they give. So yeah, that's the 2 rogues. Thanks everyone for watching today. If you have any questions or comments, or you like this video, please leave a comment below. And if you like my content in general, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, and you'll be notified when new content is uploaded. Overall, rogues are great classes. They don't require as much setup as some of the other DPS classes. They also don't require you to weave in and out of invis, which is pretty nice. Just a lot less management in that sense. So if you think you're going to be going rogue, also leave a comment and on the video, and I'm curious to see how many people will be going rogue. All right, well, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you later.